Hi everyone, this is Diego, the CTO of WorCU, and welcome to your weekly developer hours. Diego, the CTO of WorCU. Hey Walter, you there?
So, hello everybody. This is the first Convector developer office hours that we have. So I want to tell you a little bit about what we are looking for with this and what you can expect from this kind of new type of content that we want to generate for the community. So as Diego was telling before, first of all, I want to thank you all for listening to this. This is going to end up being recorded as well, so you can check it out later. So the idea of the developer office hours is to have a way for us to generate content in a more proactive way and more regularly, because we know how hard it is to find real information about Hyperledger Fabric to develop real applications. So we want to give this chance to this content, this format of content. And so the logic is pretty much there's no agenda before starting. There are some talking points that we may address. There is also no limited amount of time, so it may take only 10 minutes as it could take an hour. So if we have a lot of questions from the community that people want us to talk about, then we can extend. If not, this is going to be just a little bit about the news and what's going on in the ecosystem. So this is a community initiative. So if you want to participate eventually, if you want to talk about what you have been building with Convector, or you have some ideas or something like that, you can reach us out to the Discord chat and you can post in there. So the first thing that I want to talk about in here with Diego is about the new release that we are really excited about. It's 1.3 of Convector. So Diego, why don't you tell us a little bit about what this is bringing and what is it that developers can do now that they couldn't do before?
Yeah, so well, one of the biggest changes in this release was that we added browser support. So in the past, we were having some problems supporting browser because the dependencies in the controller were taking some other dependencies from Hyperledger Fabric itself. So when you wanted to run these controllers on the browser, it was not possible at all. But with the new release of Convector, what we did was just separate all the Fabric functionality into a separate ledger. So this is also helping us moving towards to supporting other blockchain technologies as well. The way that we achieve this is now all the Fabric dependencies are in the /@WorCU/Convector platform Fabric, and all the Fabric tools and mock data and controllers and adapters are in this package. And the Convector core is pure JavaScript now. You can load it in the browser. You can load it in actually in any other environment that supports JavaScript right now. So this is one of the biggest changes in this release. With this, we come with now Stackblitz links. I'll leave the Stackblitz links in the description channel of the video. But pretty much is now that you can run Convector code inside a runtime environment inside your browser just right away. You can just start by clicking a link, and even if you want to just play pretty quickly with Convector, you can do so right now. So it's really convenient with that. Have you tried this before, Walter, the Stackblitz?
Yeah, I think that's one of the easiest way to get started with something new. I think Composer has the playground, which made it easier for people to get a grasp on what to do. And I believe, and I need to add into what Diego is saying, that this is aligned to the vision of Convector. We created Convector specifically because we wanted something that could be a way to generate code to multiple platforms. No, but from a technical perspective, that's not something that's that simple. It's quite complex. But we have seen some advances in some other blockchain frameworks. For example, the Hyperledger team is talking a lot about the WebAssembly matters. So being able to decouple the architecture as it is right now, and as an example, we can run in the browser, but that's not the only thing that is going on. Because of this, we are moving forward to that specific feature that we expect to have, in which we could support Quorum or Sawtooth and so on, compiling these specifications that you create and this logic that you create in TypeScript into other platforms. So that's really a big deal. That's not a minor change. It's an architectural change, but I believe that there are no much breakthrough changes in the API, right? If you could dig up a little bit, Diego, about what's on 1.3 regarding the API and what should developers expect from this release?
Yeah, so we make sure that to not introduce breaking changes in the release. So we want to move forward and to transform the framework to what the community is asking for or is looking for right now. But in this change, we have the challenge to can we make breaking changes, or this is going to be compromise the stability of the people already using the framework. So we decided to just introduce frameworks progressively, like for example, this new Convector client class, Convector Fabric factory client. Sorry, this is for example a way to deprecate or aiming to deprecate the generated controller client that we have before. But if you want or you depend strictly on the generated convector controller, you will still can use that one. For example, just to give an example. Another thing we are introducing is we're bundling the other packages. For example, we have before Convector core controller and the package named Convector core model. All these core packages are now in a single package called Convector core. So this way we can progressively making changes without breaking what the people have right now. Those packages are still available on NPM, and they will keep maintaining, which is released. But we have a more convenient way right now, which is just a single package where you can just pull everything that you need in a single NPM install, for example. One other changes that we introduced on this new release was the ability for inheritance models. Models before can just pretty much be in just one model, and if you wanted to inherit or composite complex models, you were having to copy all the properties from one model to the other. And now you can just make easily them extendable, and you can pretty much do whatever you can imagine, like in a regular object-oriented language that you can extend your classes. You can pretty much do the same with Convector right now. So yeah, that's pretty much most of the updates. Yeah. We added a couple of features regarding private data, but this is specific to Fabric per se. I don't know if you want to discuss this a little bit more.
Yeah, I think I want to share my screen right now just to make it a bit more understandable what is changing regarding the API. I don't know if my screen can be seen right now.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, sure. So what we have in here, well, I don't know if this is presenting in the broadcast. Yes, it is. All right. Yeah, so the first thing is regarding the client factory that Diego was talking about. So if you remember, when we were building the smart contract before, what you usually did was create sort of a mock or a kind of interface class that you import, and then you inject whatever adapter that you want to use. For example, if you're making calls from the SDK in Node.js and you want to reuse the code and the functions and all of that, you had to use that class that was regenerated every single time. So when you wanted to try a change, you had to rebuild. Right now, that is gone. Now you have this client factory. And as Diego was saying, client factory comes from Convector core. This code example that I'm showing in here, which is Convector example drug supply chain, it's uploaded already in the repo. So in here, as you can see, we import client factory, and all we have to do is just pass the type of the controller that we want to instantiate. Then we pass an adapter like this. We just need to initialize where are the keys, what's the network profile to use, what is the user that's going to use, and initialize this. And right away, you get a fully functioning and initialized controller in the backend that can make calls automatically to your blockchain network. And so this makes things much easier. You will be less prone to errors if you forget, for example, to build while you are testing. So this is making things much more agile. And another thing that Diego was mentioning was about the packages. So you can still access things in the specific packages. So for example, I could be doing probably something like this, core, convector, core. And as you can see, I can access all the detail specifics that I have in here. So for example, I could also go to the chain code in here, and I could import, for example, the convector controller. I could import it directly from the package that is for the controller, as you can see in here. But to make things easier, you just need to import convector core, and there you go. You have all the packages right in there. So this is two of the most useful changes, if you may. It's regarding making things easier for you, that you don't have to know that much of the inner details. You can just focus on what you know. And as they were saying too, this is not a breaking change. So you can continue working the way you are, and you can migrate eventually. But we really encourage you to migrate as soon as possible, because this is going to be the future regarding these two features. Also, regarding what Diego was saying about private data, we have a repo. If you haven't accessed our GitHub repository, it's at github.com/worldcivu. In here, we have a lot of examples that we have been creating. Every time we create a code example for, I don't know, something like a customer or a project that we have, we also put it open source most of the times. So for example, in here we have the convector example private data you can access, and it is a full example on how to manage this feature that is specifically in Fabric. And what it allows you is to create some data inside of the same channel that has policies regarding who can access what and at what time. So for example, I could have a network with everybody in the call. So let's say that we are, I don't know, 20 people in a blockchain network inside of the same channel. I could some specific data regarding, I know, prices about a financial transaction that Diego and I are doing. That could be private while the rest of the data is public. So there could be a proof that the transaction actually happened, but the specific details that are commercially beneficial for us are kept privately.
This is a very interesting topic. So I don't know, Walter, can you think of a use case on a real life, an example where you will use private data, for example?
Yeah, for sure. This is actually something that when you are talking with customers for a proof of concept, this conversation almost never comes up, because people usually tend to think that the data in the blockchain is private for some reason. Like if blockchain is something more than just a data layer with integrity. So usually in a POC that conversation doesn't happen. But what we have seen with our partners and developers using Convector is that when you start actually building the business solution, they start asking you these kind of things. They will ask you, okay, but those details, I don't want my competitors to know them, because, for example, for an actual ecosystem to get into a blockchain, you will communicate and you will coexist with competitors. So these questions will start to arise. And that is one of the reasons why the Hyperledger Fabric team built it. And now we are supporting it along the support for the official support for Hyperledger Fabric 1.4, which was already working if you want it. But now we officially migrated everything into 1.4. So that is regarding examples, Diego. I can give you a lot in every industry. whether or not this is based on regulation, you have to keep some data private, whether it's for financial reasons or commercial reasons, or simply because it doesn't make sense to share all the data.
How is this different? Just thinking out loud, how is it different to put the data on a private channel, or to keep the data outside the blockchain, for example? What would you say is the difference of that?
Yeah, I think that the most important difference is the proof. You need proof of things that happened. And sometimes the same accessibility to the data, whether or not it is private, it's an important business need. So for example, let's say that you and I want to keep some data privately. So it's kind of easy if this is only two of us. But what if the data is going to be kept privately by, I don't know, 10 companies? So if you remove this from the chain, whether it's the hashes or the actual data in these private collections, you will end up having to make this, what do you have, what do I have, because we don't have a single source of data. And so the premise of having this golden repository of data is something that continues to be needed, whether or not this is private data, right? So you could store data off-chain, but integrity is going to be affected, as well the actual contents. So for example, let's say that you and I are having some transactions, and for some reason you lose the data. So how do we make sure that we have the same information, right? In scenarios where we have more companies involved, it becomes more complicated.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, some other thing that I wanted to show is that we are progressively migrating the documentation from GitHub to our own side of docs to have much more control and to update things regularly. So in here, if you go to docs.worldcivil.com, you will see that you can access the Convector documentation right away. If you get into Convector smart contracts and you go to code samples, here we have like a directory. So it's the same that you have in the repo, but it's explaining what every single example does. So for example, here's one for a full stack application. Here's one for how to handle identities. Here's another one for unit testing and debugging. And here's the other one that we have been talking about on private data. So if you want to drill down, you can click on the source code and you can see what happens. In this specific example, this is a really good example because it shows you how to test private data in a mock, how to test private data in an actual blockchain, and how to test private data from your backend, from a Node.js backend, based on the test classes that we created in the repo. So you can test the full flow. So you don't have to worry about if things break or you have to test things every time you release. You can follow these best practices that are in here.
Awesome. This is good. So just I'll show my screen. I want to show a little bit of the code changes that I did to support private data. Let me take a look right here. Yeah. So actually, well, private data for the way that Convector works for us is pretty straightforward because we always keep a reference to the underlying adapter controlling the controllers, for example. And in Fabric, this means that you can have direct access to the Fabric libraries if, for example, on the day on tomorrow, they release another feature and Convector doesn't necessarily have to release something to support this feature. You can just have access right away to this by actually taking advantage of this adapter and all the configurations that you can do. But for example, on the private data side, let me show you something.
Sorry, Diego, and I want to add something there because some people used to ask us if Convector supported or not Hyperion Fabric 1.4. So the answer usually is yes, it does. But our examples were connected to 1.1 at the beginning, then 1.2, then 1.3. So that this is why maybe the message may be confusing sometimes, and some people think that Convector does not support the newest versions of Hyper-V Fabric. And the architectural reason why that is real, that is true, is because of what Diego was saying. It's because we have this pure dependencies model in which the fabric can change, but Convector still gets access to whatever changes there come. So it's not in the same case, for example, like Composer, that they created a lot of abstraction layers. In this case, Convector works in parallel to the Fabric SDK and the Fabric API. So we can access them, and they can change at the same time without affecting one or the other.
Yeah, so for example, to demonstrate that, here I have a controller. This controller is saying that it uses the chain code transaction. And what this types in here, which, by the way, this import comes from Convector Platform Fabric, is just give you access to their direct APIs from Fabric when this is invoked in a chain code. So for example, if you go is.px, you will get this stop property, and the stop property pretty much have access to pretty much all the methods inside Fabric. So this is not an API from us, from Convector itself. This is an API directly from Fabric. So at the day of tomorrow, when they release another method, you can, if Convector doesn't give you a shortcut to access this method, you can access it right away without us having to make any release to support that directly. But we do generate some shortcuts for you because there are some certain things that really are hard to do with the Fabric SDK. At the end, what Convector does is abstracting all these complexities from the Fabric SDK, so you can just focus on what you actually want to do. And for example, private data is a pretty well example to demonstrate this. For example, on private data, when you want to work with private data, at the time that you send the first transaction to get the data into the actually private collection, you don't actually want to send this data in the public transaction fields, because those transactions will get populated to all the networks. So even if you are storing that data in a private collection that is only accessible to certain peers, the transaction that got this data into the blockchain will be public to all the other nodes. So you want to avoid this. And this is accomplished in Fabric by using a transient field. A transient field is a special field when you send a transaction that is hidden to all the members and just the ones that they are allowed to read them. For example, in this case, if we want to access this transient data, what we do is this.tx.get transient value, and we just pass the value that we want to read and a formatter for this value. So in this case, this formatter is a model, actually. If I go and click here, I will get access to a model. So what I'm expecting in this scenario is that someone sends me a transient data with a name called marble, and that this data has to be with this shape. So just like this, I got to access to the transient data. But to do this using the Fabric APIs, you actually have to do like converting buffers to strings, and then converting strings to the model. And actually, to get access to the transient data, you have to call like 2 or 3 methods using the Fabric SDK. With Convector, you can just do that easily with just a single line. Same thing when saving private data, you just call. So we generate a new model called Marble, and we would just populate the fields of this model. And just like we do regularly for any other data that we want to save in Fabric. And when we call .save, instead of just leave this empty like you regularly do on a regular save, you just put the private collection where you want to store this, and that's it. This is quickly, you just support a private data, which is a really hot feature in Fabric right now, in just seconds without doing too much. It's really convenient. There is a lot of examples like this. For example, if you want to, for example, get a collection, get a data from the private collection, you just do the same. You do a get one, which is something you regularly do on Convectors right now. You pass the ID of what you want to store, and you got to pass the formatter, and you got the private collection where you store this. So it's pretty easy to do. And like examples like this, we have some more examples. I think I have some work in progress in here. Let me take a look. I think those are in our branch.
Yeah, I think, Diego, that this is a great example of what we were talking before about, that you could do this directly with the Fabric APIs without depending on us adding new layers in here. But we do things much easier. We try to listen to what the community is asking for, and we try to make things feel more more modern in terms of how you develop and what you are expecting in the API. Have a better developer experience. But you could have done this before without the Convector changes. It's happening the same with events. That is something that we will be adding support later in the following months. But again, you can use the API directly, or you can work through these helpers that make things richer to use, right?
Yeah, correct. So just to give you an example of the counterpart of how you consume these private data features is this is a unit test. This is a product that is packed. And the way that you interact with this transient data that I showed you previously on the spec is you call it product controller. It's a product controller is a Convector controller client. It's a new client factory that we created. And you just pass this .config. So the Convector controller doesn't have actually a method called such as that. So if I go to the controller again, I just get a method called initMarble, readMarble, and readMarble private details. Sorry. But this has this kind of special methods that start with $. For example, config is one of them, where you can just pass configuration to the adapters and in this transaction. And where in this case, we're passing a transient value that the Convector adapter for Fabric will take special treatment over this value and send the transient data properly. So in this case, we're sending a marble, which, if we remember correctly, was a marble transient input, right? Here in the controller, yeah, it was a marble transient input, the one that we were expecting, and it's a marble transient input, the one that we're sending. And with just this, we call initMarble, the intended method that we want to call, which is this one, initMarble, and the transaction will go away with this configuration, having in mind. So it's really pretty convenient methods. Let's take a look at Discord chat. Okay, so there's no questions in the YouTube channel. And check it yet.
Yeah, I don't think there are. So yeah, just to make things clear, this example that Diego is showing in here, it is in the repo. You can just download this, go through the README, and you can start using private data. And again, this is a really hot feature. You really need to consider how this works, because this really differentiates Hyperledger Fabric from other frameworks, right? Some other frameworks are still experimenting with ways to handle data that is private, but at the same time, data that could be proven and that could be GDPR compliant, which is something that is also important. Hyperledger is looking forward to and is finding ways to support these regulations in places like Europe and pretty much right now in the whole world, where you have customers or you relate with people that is based in these countries. So I think this is a really great example. This is also an example on how we want to make things, and this is a way to show how we believe that the APIs and the developer experience overall should be for a developer.
Cool. So another example that I wanted to show to the public right now is I think we didn't demo it, the ability to Convector to run in the browser, which now opens up the possibility to users to integrate with, for example, Angular or React or Vue applications or any kind of framework that runs on the front end, right? So as we mentioned before, this is possible right now because Convector now separate the things, and now all the specific things, all the JavaScript specific things are in the Convector core, and everything Fabric related is in Convector platform Fabric. But we are starting to support some other properties, for example, some other platforms. Sorry. So, for example, Convector platform browser is a package containing all the things that you will need to develop or to make some examples running on the browser if you want or if you may. For example, we have the browser controller adapter. Remember, the way that Convectors interacts with the underlying layer is through adapters. So the controller, when you make a controller, it is pretty generic. It just has the logic, the JavaScript logic to accept or deny transactions. And the way that this controller communicates with each of the blockchain platforms is through an adapter. In this case, we're using the Convector, the browser controller adapter, sorry. And configure is pretty straightforward. You just have to initialize the adapter and call the client factory with the corresponding controller that you want to use, and the adapter that you want to use as well. And with this, you just initialize, and you're pretty much done to work. This is an example of an Angular application running a controller with some users. Actually, let me show you the model first. A user with some properties, a name, a balance, and an array of allowed identities. And the controller, we just do some register, renaming the user if they want, and transfer some money. So let's take a look at how the Angular logic looks for this. So we have here a service, a regular service. Anyone familiar with Angular knows that you interact in the page using services. Here we're just instantiating the browser controller adapter and the user as well. And pretty much this is it. When we want to interact in components, for example, in the transfer component, we just call, take a look, this is a component, it's in here, yeah. So we call in the register, which is this forming here, we are just going to put some name one, and password. It's pretty secure, this input, right? So what is going on here is I'm calling user service.user. I'm passing this with user, which is, you remember, this special properties that starts with $, our specials command for the adapter. So I'm sending that password. This is going to mimic the uses of an identity inside the blockchain. So remember, this example is like emulating a blockchain inside a framework, inside the browser. So this .password, which is the field in here, is going to be used as the identity of this new participant that I'm going to register. And I'm passing an ID for this one and a name for this one. So I'm going to call register, and I got the logic in here. In the controller, I have stated that each user, when they register, they will get $1,000 in this case. So this is what is happening here. I can also do transfers. So when I do a transfer, I select, for example, name one. I want to transfer. Oh, no, sorry, this is the destination. I want to transfer to Diego, 500, for example. And I'll type the password if I remember it correctly. And boom, now Diego has 107,000. And yeah, this is pretty much how it works. You can pretty much take a look at the logs in here. I think, oh, actually the logs are here. I think in the logs, no, it's not too much to show. But you can pretty much start debugging the controllers in here if you need to. Let's take a look. If I go for user controller, you have the code. It's just JavaScript compiled code, so you'll have to put some breakpoints on it. But for example, if we put a breakpoint in the transfer function, let's take a look in here. Now, if I try to do a run transfer, for example, transfer to Walter, let's say I want to transfer 2,000. I can't remember the password for this account actually, but it doesn't matter. You can pretty much inspect all the properties that you will get in a real chain code inside the browser right here, just you can pretty much do whatever you need to inspect and debug the controllers, to report the bugs. This is pretty helpful for when you have a bug and you want to report the bug on us in our Discord channel. If you can go first to this Stackblitz platform and create your example and replicate your error in here, and you just send us the link that you generated at the end, we can replicate it much more easily and take a look at it faster.
Yeah, I was going to say precisely that that it's helping us debug things. As some of you may notice, we are really active in the community. We really like helping you get the actual results that you are looking for the framework. Probably this is not that common in some communities, but we actually like engaging and we actually like helping you. So if by any time you find a bug or you think you found a bug, so you can replicate this, as Diego was saying, and you can share it with us, and it's way easier for us to help you, yeah, right? So yeah, that's a really big deal, and something that is important from all of this, and I think that Diego already said, is that all of this code is the same that is going to be running on the blockchain, right? This is the easiest way and the fastest way to create something using the same syntax. But at the end, right, you can take this and you can bring it to your blockchain, to your smart contract, and you can deploy it, right, Diego?
Yeah, correct. So, yeah, and just talking about the debugging points, we recently released a blog post covering much of the debugging capabilities. So you can right now debug, well, your unit tests. You can open up your Node.js inspector and debug also the unit test. And recently we just added some tutorial on how to debug inside the chain code per se. So this is a really a really good thing right now on the Convector that we are Hardy, which is our development environment, now has the capability to run the chain codes in development mode. So this means that when you install a chain code and you instantiate this chain code, what usually happens in Fabric is that it will create a container at the end. But this container is pretty restrictive on the things that you can do, because obviously reasons when you run a chain code, you want to make sure you run the chain code in a controller environment. But for debugging or for development, this is not ideal sometimes. So Harley now has the ability to run the chain codes in development mode, and this will spawn the contracts inside your local machine, inside your node server. You can just do an npm start in your chain code, and that's the one that is going to be executed. This allows us to do pretty much cool things. For example, debugging. You can now attach breakpoints and do like live reload of the code when you are authoring it, without having to install the chain code again. So because you can, since you are in control of the server, you can stop the server and start the server again, and this chain code will have the new changes. So actually on Convector, we included, let me show you here some of these changes. We have in the package JSON now, this install debug, and it will call harl install, and all the other properties that are usually right now you can pass the debug parameter in here, and this will run in the debug mode, so you can attach properties and attach breakpoints to it. Inside of the chain code that is produced, you will take a look at this package JSON in here. Let's format it a little bit. And it now has this task called start debug. It will start a node moon and with the Spectre port already set. So this node moon is a utility for Node.js that when you make a change in code, it will automatically refresh the server running it. So this means we have hot reload right now for contracts, which is pretty convenient when you're developing. Right.
Diego, we do have some questions in the chat. It's from Buba. I hope I pronounced this correctly. He's asking, how are the relations managed between models? That is, what happens during the saving and the loading when, for example, I reference an array of car model in a user model?
So let's take a look at that. So we have a model in here. So he's asking what is Fabric's adapt? How are the relations managed between models? This is what happens during the saving and the loading. For example, reference and a write of car model in a user model. Okay, so there's two things that can happen on right now on Convector. You can save references or you can save copies of models. So the first one is, for example, if I do in here, let's take a look. I will create this one. So if I have a nested prop in here, and I want this to be an array of Marble private details, just for example, what I can do is I can have an array of strings and make this a validate, Jupe, that array being a string, Jupe, that string, and have a copy of all the IDs pointing to a record of Marble private details already stored in the ledger. The other options that I have is to put a validate Jupe that array of Jupe Marble private details that schema. So this way, it will create it's going to be an array of this one. It says before this declaration, okay, we have we need to use job.lazy here. Job.lazy. Let's take a look. Right. So in this case, we have somewhat like the same principle, but with two different approaches. In this one, we're just starting the IDs, so we can reference the IDs back to other Marble private details. This will have to be on your own right now on the controller. You can make the iterate this array of IDs and either go to Marble private details that get by ID or get one, sorry, and pass the ID, and you can populate those. Or you can store a full copy of this Marble private details object inside this property here. The two are like, there is no one better than the other. So this one is when you want to keep a reference. So whenever that object changes, you can always get the latest version of that object. And this one is when you want to copy that. And even if the other reference changes, you will always get here the copy that was created when you inserted the values in this property.
Yeah, so something that's important in there, Diego, and I want to mention, is that in some regulated environments, you cannot keep just references in your objects. So for example, if you're working with an ISO or another standard, you usually need nested objects, as what Diego is doing here. So in this case, and correct me if I'm wrong, Diego, but when you type save for the Marble, it will save the whole object, included the nested properties, right?
Correct.
So this is something that is also relevant, because I saw some questions in the Hyperledger forum. Some people were asking how to handle multiple models at the same time, right? And how to save them. I don't know if you can go to the product controller quick. Yeah, in there, just a second. In there, as you can see, there are two models, call one data and call two data. So let's ignore the private data for a second. But these two are separate models that will be stored in the blockchain, and they don't necessarily need to be related. So inside of the same function, we can have multiple models. So that is something also important for the question, because in the same transaction, if you may, in the same function, you can save, or you can create, or you can query, or you can modify different kinds of models. And if you need, you can relate them, as how Diego was showing.
Yeah, correct. There is no strictly relation, and that's another question that I keep hearing a lot. There is no specific relation between a controller and a model. The fact that this is called product controller and the other one is called product controller is because they have the same target in mind, but there is nothing stopping you having a single controller operating over 2 or 3 or more models. So yeah, just pointing that out.
Yeah, we have another question in here. Is Fabric's adapter for unit test advanced enough to allow, for example, to test of endorsement policies?
So the Fabric adapter is not actually for testing. The Fabric adapter is a way to invoke the Fabric SDK. So if you have a way to test that in your Fabric environment, you can do that. I'm not sure if you were more relating to the mock controller adapter, which is emulating a blockchain for unit testing. And
yeah, I
that
think
one,
that was what he was referring to. It says Fabric's adapter for unit test. So yeah, it's probably the mock adapter.
Yeah, it's probably the mock adapter. So that one is usually it has some validations to accomplish. Like you can work with certificates to prove if someone has the permissions or not. I'm not quite sure. Let me take a look at this because we relegate this to another one. Let me take a look. I have something here. Ledger. So we use actually the mock adapter comes from a project called the Ledger Fabric Mock Fabric. Yeah. Here's the documentation of this, guys. This is the engine that we rely for unit testing. I think they have some. Let me take a look. Composite, Chain mock stop, all this stuff. The Chain mock stop is pretty much the one that takes care of all the validations and all the consensus. I'm not sure if this has a field, for example, to specify. No, it doesn't seem like. Yeah, this is mostly to test your transaction information, even transaction queries or things like this. But for example, the consensus of a network, that will be something you want to test on the network, on a proper network itself, I think.
Yeah, I do think the same. I think it will be kind of hard to test something like that because the mock doesn't actually have peers. It's actually just one ledger, one shared ledger. So yeah, I don't think that the current architecture will allow something like that. What you will have to do is probably modify some of the Hurley scripts to allow that testing. So yeah, the answer is not for now. It is not possible to test endorsing policies in a mock adapter.
Yeah, regarding the update the Fabric the Harley network, I have a Fabric network in here. So every time you generate a network, let's actually bring up the console in here. Let's a new tab. Yeah, every time you generate a new network with Harley, it will generate this folder in your home directory called Fabric, Hyperledger Fabric Network. And if you step up in this folder, you will have all these files in here. Okay, let's open up code here. So if you want to modify the network that Harley creates for you, so you can adapt it to your needs, you can easily do so by taking a look at the, let's say, Docker Compose, I think. Yeah, so in the Docker Compose, you can pretty much update all the infrastructure that we create to set up the Fabric network. You can also have the files, the config transaction files in here, and the crypto config YAML in here. So if you want to modify one of the settings regarding Harley and how the network that it starts, you can do so by updating these files. And I think it's called generator. Correct me if I'm wrong, Walter. It's called generator.
For the policy?
Yeah, I think
it's actually on the config. Yeah, config.
Yeah, so you update the configs, but then you call generator, I think, right? To generate the new config material and all the stuff, right? Yeah, I think so. So yeah, so pretty much everything will change that you want to create on this testing network that already starts for you. You can come easily to this folder inside Hyperledger Fabric Network inside your home directory, and you can pretty much update and change everything in here and start the network right away. I'll actually call restart. This will turn down and on your local network. So you can make those changes and test your things in this network. see. Here, it's almost 1 hour already.
Yeah, I think that pretty much covers the big changes that we have had for. Oh, sorry. Yeah, for this new release. Also, yeah, this took much more than I was expecting. There are a lot of changes, a lot of things that are going on. We probably missed some of the new features that, for example, Hurley is bringing, or some of the minor changes that Convector has. But remember that you can talk to us directly in the Discord chat. We really like helping you build and design your solutions, so you can get in there. As you can see, the community is pretty active and it is growing. We try to do for the community what we wanted the community to be. So as developers, we understand what is needed, and hopefully these Convector developer hours actually become a thing, and we can continue replicating this every week and get into more specific hands-on examples.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm happy to share this kind of time with the community. I hope more people start to join the weekends, well, the Fridays on this live streaming, so we can just answer all your questions. And if you have like any questions and you want to answer like it more like in personal, you can write us on Discord, like Walter was saying, or tune us next Friday the same time. So I think that's it for me.
Yeah, it's the same on my side. So thank you for tuning in, and see you next week.
See you next week, guys.